Hi, thanks for joining. My name's Lucy. I'm a senior consultant at Amadeus Software, a SAS consultancy company, and I do a lot of work with SAS Visual Analytics. My paper title is Raising the Bar, Developing World-Class Reports with SAS Visual Analytics. SAS Visual Analytics is an interactive reporting tool that can be used to create dynamic reports and dashboards. This paper is about raising the bar with the reports you're creating. I'll walk through 3 techniques that you can use to exploit the functionality available and generate the best reports possible. It's important to create as best report as you can, world-class, sophisticated, good-looking reports. The more care you take to create your reports, the more the user will get out of them. I'd like to think about the information the user can gain in the first 5 seconds of seeing a graph. If they're still trying to work out what on earth the graph is showing them, then there's definitely scope for improving the design. So essentially, during this presentation, we'll look at 3 key techniques after a quick introduction. The first technique will be enhancing a default visual. By that, I mean taking a graph that you can create out of the box from SAS Visual Analytics and exploring all the options and settings that are available to make sure the graph really shows what you want it to. The second thing we'll look at is the SAS Graph Builder. It's an application that allows you to define your own custom graph templates and add them to the list in the Objects tab to be used when you're creating reports. The last thing we'll look at is the DataDriven Content object. It's a really powerful object and allows you to embed third-party visualizations inside your SAS Visual Analytics report. So that's what we'll cover. We'll start off with the introduction. When you first create a report in SAS Visual Analytics, the Objects tab will show you around 40 different visuals, absolutely loads of choice for the graphs that you use to create your reports. A few of the most common ones are including pie charts, heat maps, histograms. As discussed, it's important to create the right graph, but there are so many different types of data that you could be working with. There is no single visualization to present all of your data. Before we have a look at an example of that, the case study we're using throughout this presentation is based on a UK gym company, looking both at the total number of members that each gym currently has, and also the targets that have been set for the number of members in each gym. So as we look at the examples, we'll refer to all of those things. Okay, so we'll first look at what makes a graph good, and then we'll look at an example that explores different options and settings in SAS Visual Analytics for a graph that we'll create. So to start off with, I've got 2 graphs on the screen, graph 1, graph 2. I'm going to go through a couple of questions and I'd like you to think about which graph you'd use to try and answer these questions. Which gym has the most members? The second question is which gym has more members, Hackney Town or Islington? Hopefully you pick graph 2. Both these graphs are showing exactly the same data, but graph 1, although colourful, is quite hard to get any meaning from. You can't tell the differences between each of the gyms quickly. Graph 2, on the other hand, shows each of the bars, the length determines the number of members, and the number is also printed on it. It shows that there are completely different ways of presenting the same data, but not all are good. So whenever you're creating a graph, it's really good to consider how you're presenting it. We'll now look at an example in SAS Visual Analytics of a graph that we've created, the problems that it shows, and how to overcome those, just with the settings and options available. Okay, so the following graph is a targeted bar chart. It's showing each gym across the bottom. The bars are showing the total members at each gym, and the black markers on each of the bars are showing the targets that have been set for each gym. Now, the first problem that I decided with this graph is that the gym names are not fully visible. You could hover over and get some more information. Visual Analytics is interactive, but really you're trying to let the users see as much as they can right from the beginning. So that's the first thing we'll address. A second thing is you cannot easily see how many gyms are below their targets. You could go through and study each of the bars, but there's lots there, so the information's getting lost. The last one is it's not easy to see which gyms are performing the worst. That is, which gyms are furthest from meeting their targets if they are not meeting their targets. Okay, so let's have a look at what we can do in SAS Visual Analytics to overcome some of those things. Things to consider are generally found on the right-hand side when you click on a graph, including options, rules, filters, and ranks. So options are generally used for controlling the properties of the axes, the titles, the legends, the overall look and feel that helps the user understand what they're seeing. The rules, also known as display rules, allow you to create logic-based rules to dynamically color parts of your graph. Styles should also be used. They sit under the Options tab, but they can set standard themes throughout your reports to make consistency and make that a way of allowing users to see what's happening straight away. The last couple of things to consider are filters and ranks. Filters allow you to create logic-based rules to control how much data is being presented in the graph. And ranks are similar. You're controlling how much data is shown in the graph, but instead of based on some logic, it's simply a top or bottom count. So for example, if we're showing total number of members, we could set a rank to show the gyms with the lowest number of members and would pick how many we wanted to see, so 10 or 15. So let's have a look at a few of those in action for our targeted bar chart. First of all, the options. The first one highlighted is setting the title. If the title's clear and it explains exactly what the graph is showing, users will understand quite quickly what they're looking at. We'll also set the X-axis option to rotate the gym names. You can create as many display rules as you want. I've created two different ones here based on a column called difference. The column called difference is a calculation between the total number of members, take away the target that we've set them. So if the difference is a negative number, the gym has not met their target. If it's a positive number, they have met their target. So here we've set one display rule that if the difference is positive, the bar will be grey. If it's negative, we'll make it red so it quickly stands out. And last but not least, we'll add a rank. We'll limit the amount of information shown in the graph to only those gyms that really aren't performing very well. So we've created a rank on gym name, looking at the bottom count. We want to see 15 gyms, and we'll evaluate what counts as a bottom by the columns. So the most negative values will be shown. And the result of that is this graph. So we've got the title, we've got each of the bars for the 15 lowest performing gyms, those gyms that have the biggest negative or difference between their targets and the amount they have at the moment. Across the bottom are all the gym names quite clearly presented and the color coding on the bars of those that aren't meeting their targets. To summarize, whenever you're using SAS Visual Analytics, you do have lots of options for the graph that you use. So the first thing is to pick the graph that is most suitable for the data you're working with. Once you've done that, there's absolutely tons of settings and options that you can use to customize the output that you're creating. Always consider these steps whenever you're creating a new graph, regardless of whether you've decided it's not good enough or not. Always explore the options that we've discussed. Okay, so next up is the second technique that we'll cover to enhance how your reports look. This one's using a slightly different application that comes with your SAS Viya environment called the SAS Graph Builder. This technique's about creating your own graph templates and adding them to the list of objects. As you can see in the screenshot, the standard list of graphs that you can create are there, and the highlighted one in blue says line chart with time flag. We've created that in the graph builder, and import it into the objects so that we can use it as a normal graph. The SAS Graph Builder will allow you to join graphs together and steal properties from two different graphs and create a new graph using them, or overlay graphs on top of each other, or just create graphs that share roles, maybe x-axis or y-axis roles. So lots of scope, and let's have a look at a practical example. Okay, so here we've got a line chart, nothing special, out of the box line chart showing join month across the bottom and total number of members up the side. In SAS Visual Analytics line charts, there's no way of annotating data points. Unless you took a screenshot of it and started scribbling on your important data. In this example, sometime around June, I've highlighted as important, so I've scribbled it on. However, SAS Visual Analytics is a reporting tool for dynamic data. The data should refresh and you don't need to recreate your report every time. So that's not the ideal solution. What we can do is we can use the SAS Graph Builder to define a new chart template, get the role of a data label in, and it will allow us to add annotations to the line chart. Okay, so here's a screenshot of the SAS Graph Builder. It's an application. It looks quite similar to the Visual Analytics layout, so it's user-friendly. On the left-hand side, you've got your graph elements. Each of those are the templates that you can start with. You can drag them onto the middle, overlay them on top of each other, and then use properties from both to create your final graph. The graphs we're using for this example are a line chart and a series plot. We're using the series plot because it doesn't allow your date on the x-axis, so we can't use that straight away. However, it does have an extra role for a data label, so you can annotate data points. We'll combine the two, take the roles from the line chart, the data label from the series plot. So we've added them both into the middle. On the right-hand side, we can control what roles are going to be in the output. To start off with, the line chart we'll leave as it is, and the series plot we want to add a role. So we can add any extra roles. Each chart will have different roles available. On this one, the role we want is data label. On top of that are loads of different options you can specify. In fact, there's plenty more options here than by default in the report designer. So at this point, you'd go through and choose all the properties, how you want the x-axis, the y-axis, and the data itself to look. We'll color the line chart as normal, and we'll color the series plot as white, so it's hidden in the background. We don't want our lines duplicated. We only want to highlight the labels using the series plot. When you're done, save it, and then you can share that object between any users that you want to and import it into your objects pane. So I've saved it as line chart with time flag, and now it's ready to use just like any other objects in your report. Drag it on and add your data to it, and here is our embellished line chart. We've got our line chart data from before, but we've added onto it our data labels. The roles on the right-hand side, as you can see, are very similar to any other object you'd use. At the bottom, we've got the data label we added. In this example, we've chosen to flag up June of each year. So we've got June 2016, 17, and 18 highlighted as markers. Essentially, you could have put any data into that to highlight whatever was required. To summarize, the SAS Graph Builder is a really good application to help you enhance the graphics that you're creating. The new templates can be used in your report and also shared between any number of users, and they can use them as well. So it's a one-time task creating all your new graph templates. It's a quick way, and it's also in your native SAS interface that you should be familiar with if you're using SAS Visual Analytics. So it's a really good place to start to try and expand how much you can do in your reports. Okay, so the last thing that we'll look at is data-driven content. Data-driven content is an object in the default SAS Visual Analytics that allows you to embed a third-party application visual inside your Visual Analytics report. It allows you to embed basically any JavaScript-based visual. You can develop your own from scratch if you have the skills or know someone that has the skills, or you can use ones that are already available. There's tons of libraries of shared graphs already out there. Essentially, you'd use the DataDriven Content object to do one of two things. One, maybe bring in a graph that already exists, but has properties that aren't available by default in SAS Visual Analytics. The other option is bringing in completely new graphs. So if your graph doesn't exist, the way you want to present your data does not exist as a default graphic in SAS Visual Analytics, you can create it and bring it in. The great thing about this object is the graphs you create work exactly like your SAS Visual Analytics objects. When you import them into your report, they'll interact, they'll be able to be filtered, you can add the data exactly as you are when you're using a normal SAS Visual Analytics object. Okay, so we'll have a quick look at an example. First of all, we've picked D3. There's lots of JavaScript libraries you can use, but we've found that D3 brings probably the most new functionality to reports. And if you are familiar with HTML, it's not too difficult to learn. So I've got a quick video of a D3 graphic that we'll be using in a SAS Visual Analytics report. The graphic at the moment is not in VA, it's just in an internet page, and it has hard-coded data in it. When we bring it into VA, we'll want to address that, we'll want it embedded in the report, and we'll want the data coming from VA. So first of all, let's have a look at the graphic. Okay, so here's a bar chart. You can have a bar chart in Visual Analytics, so we're using a graph that already exists, but adding functionality that isn't there in a default bar chart. In this case, as you hover over the bars, the surrounding bars dynamically change color, and as you move the mouse away, they'll change back to their original color. So the functionality we're adding in is called on mouse hover. As you hover your mouse, something happens. I said that graph has hard-coded data in it. What you could do if you want to bring it into SAS Visual Analytics is we need to make two changes to the code. We're not going to go into the code used to create the graph. That code and the code that is adapted is all available on the SAS Global Forum GitHub if you want to have a look at it in more detail. But I thought I'd pick out the two really important bits of information that you'll need to know if you are creating D3 graphs yourself. First of all is a listener. That graph that I just showed you reacts as your mouse hovers over it. The listener is part of the code that's listening for the movement, the reaction and the interaction from SAS Visual Analytics. So that needs to be part of your code to make sure the graphs are interactive. The data receiver is the second important thing. We want to be able to pass data from SAS Visual Analytics into the object, and we want the object to render the graph showing that data dynamically and every time we look at the report. So that data receiver replaces hard-coded data or wherever else the data is and will allow the data to be passed from SAS Visual Analytics. Okay, so getting that graph into your report, first of all, we need to save the code on your SAS Viya server. There is a specific folder to save it in. Once you've done that, add the object into your report, specify the web content URL in the Options tab to point to your graph that you've saved on your SAS Viya server. The last thing to do is add the data roles. So it's just like a normal graph. Now we've embedded it. The data roles expects variables. The variables are dependent on how you've coded the graph. So in this case, I've added gym name and total members. In the report, the graph will automatically interact with any other objects. So we'll have a look at a quick video of a button bar simply interacting with the graph we've created. As you click on the button bar, it will filter down to the bar chart. The bar chart looks like a native SAS Visual Analytics graph. So to summarize, D3 itself and any other JavaScript library you can use really drastically extends the opportunities you have with how you present your data in SAS Visual Analytics. Leveraging the power of third-party graphics or graphs, you can choose to add functionality to graphs that already exist or bring in completely new graphs. They'll work seamlessly in your report as if they were native to SAS Visual Analytics, including filters, interactions with other objects, ranks, and many other things. Okay, so that brings us to the end of the presentation. To summarize, it's really important to engineer a great graphic and to consider how your audience is perceiving what you've created. Thanks for your time and thanks for joining.